My wife called my mom to vent about wanting to divorce me because I'm too boring but forgot she was on speakerphone and I heard everything, so I filed the papers before she could. I need to get this off my chest because my whole world just got turned upside down and I'm still trying to process what happened. My wife Emma and I have been married for 6 years and I genuinely thought we were happy. Not like movie perfect happy but normal married couple happy where we have our routines and our inside jokes and we still hold hands when we watch TV on the couch. I work as an accountant and Emma works part-time at a bookstore and we live in this cute little house with a garden that she loves tending and I thought we had a good life together. My mom has always adored Emma, like genuinely loved her as a daughter-in-law, and they talk on the phone at least twice a week about everything from recipes to TV shows to whatever drama is happening in Emma's friend group. I always thought it was sweet that they got along so well because I know a lot of guys whose wives can't stand their mothers, but Emma and my mom have this really close relationship where they genuinely enjoy each other's company. My mom will call Emma directly instead of calling me sometimes and they'll chat for an hour about gardening or some book they're both reading and I never thought anything weird about it. Last Tuesday I was working from home because I had a big project deadline and needed the quiet to focus without office distractions. Emma had left for work around 10 in the morning and I was deep into spreadsheets when around noon I heard her car in the driveway. I figured she was coming home for lunch or had forgotten something, but I was so focused on my work that I didn't really think about it. I had my headphones on and was completely absorbed in what I was doing when I heard Emma's voice coming from downstairs. At first I thought maybe she was on the phone with a friend or watching something on her laptop, but then I heard my mom's voice too and I realized Emma must have called her. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but our house isn't that big and sound carries especially when people are talking in their normal voices. I was about to take my headphones off and go say hi to both of them when I heard Emma say something that made my blood run cold. She said, "I just don't know how much longer I can pretend to be happy in this marriage when honestly I'm dying of boredom every single day." I froze completely because what the heck was she talking about? I pulled off my headphones and just sat there listening because I had to be hearing this wrong. There was no way my wife was telling my mother that she was unhappy in our marriage. But then my mom's voice came through clear as day asking Emma what she meant, and that's when Emma really let loose. She told my mom that she felt like she was married to the most boring man on the planet and that our life together was like watching paint dry. She said I never surprised her or did anything spontaneous and that I was content to just exist in our little routine forever without ever wanting anything more exciting or interesting. Emma told my mom that she felt like she was slowly suffocating in our marriage and that she'd been thinking about divorce for months but didn't know how to bring it up because I seemed so content with our boring life. My mom asked her if she'd tried talking to me about wanting more excitement or adventure, and Emma laughed this bitter laugh and said what was the point because I was too set in my ways to change. She said she'd tried dropping hints about wanting to travel more or try new things but I never picked up on them, and that I was perfectly happy coming home from work and eating dinner and watching the same shows and going to bed at the same time every night like some old married couple. Then Emma said something that really crushed me. She told my mom that she felt like she'd married her dad instead of a husband because I was responsible and reliable and boring and never made her feel excited or passionate about anything. She said she loved me but wasn't in love with me anymore and that she felt more like roommates than spouses and that she was only 28 and didn't want to spend the rest of her life feeling dead inside. I was sitting at my desk just shaking because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my wife talking to my mother about how miserable she was in our marriage and how she wanted to leave me, and I had no idea she felt this way. We'd been together for 8 years total and married for 6, and I thought we were solid. Sure, we weren't the type of couple that goes skydiving or takes spontaneous trips to Vegas, but I thought we were building something stable and lasting together. My mom was asking Emma if she'd considered marriage counseling, and Emma said she didn't think counseling could fix the fundamental problem, which was that we were just incompatible. She said I was a homebody who was perfectly content with our quiet life and she was realizing that she needed more excitement and passion than I could give her. Emma told my mom that she'd been looking at apartments online and had even talked to a divorce lawyer about what the process would look like and that she was probably going to ask me for a separation within the next few weeks. The worst part was hearing my mom trying to defend me in our marriage. She kept saying that I was a good husband who loved Emma and provided for her and that maybe Emma just needed to communicate better about what she wanted. But Emma kept shutting her down and saying that you can't change someone's fundamental personality and that I was never going to be the adventurous, exciting husband she needed me to be. Emma told my mom that she'd tried to make it work for years but she was tired of feeling like she was living in a retirement home at 28 and that she deserved to be with someone who shared her desire for adventure and spontaneity. She said she knew it would hurt me but that staying married to someone you're not in love with wasn't fair to either of us and that she'd rather hurt me now than waste more years of both our lives pretending to be happy. I couldn't listen anymore, so I crept upstairs to our bedroom and just sat on the bed trying to process what I'd heard. My wife had been planning to divorce me for months and I had no clue. She thought I was boring and that our marriage was suffocating her, and she'd already talked to a lawyer about leaving me. I felt like such an idiot because I'd been going through life thinking we were happy while she was dying inside and planning her escape. About 20 minutes later I heard Emma end the call with my mom and come upstairs. She poked her head into my office and asked how my work was going and if I wanted her to make me a sandwich for lunch, and I just stared at her because how could she act so normal after what she'd just said. She looked at me weird and asked if I was okay, and I told her I was fine, just stressed about my deadline, and she kissed my forehead and said she'd leave me alone to work. I spent the rest of that day and most of the night thinking about everything Emma had said and trying to figure out what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately and demand to know why she'd never talked to me about feeling unhappy, but another part of me was just devastated that my wife had been lying to my face for months while planning to leave me. The next morning, I called in sick to work, and after Emma left for her job, I started looking through our computer and found exactly what she'd told my mom she'd been doing. There were browser histories showing apartment listings and divorce lawyer websites and even some dating profiles she'd apparently been looking at. I found emails to her sister talking about how she was planning to leave me and asking for advice about how to start over as a single woman. Reading those emails was like getting punched in the stomach over and over again, because Emma had been living this whole secret life where she was planning her future without me while I thought we were building our future together. She'd told her sister the same things she'd told my mom about being bored and feeling trapped, and how she needed to find someone more compatible with her desire for adventure and excitement. I also found a draft email she'd written to me but never sent, where she explained that she was unhappy in our marriage and wanted a trial separation. In the email, she said all the same things about being bored and feeling like roommates and needing space to figure out what she wanted. She'd written this email 3 weeks ago but apparently decided to keep living the lie instead of actually sending it and having an honest conversation with me. That's when I decided I wasn't going to sit around waiting for Emma to work up the courage to leave me. If she wanted out of our marriage so badly that she was already planning her new life and talking to lawyers, then I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. I called a divorce attorney that same day and scheduled a consultation for the next morning. The lawyer explained that since we don't have kids and our finances are pretty straightforward, the divorce process could be relatively quick and simple, especially if we both wanted it. I told him about overhearing Emma's conversation with my mom and finding all the evidence that she'd been planning to leave me for months, and he said that actually worked in my favor because it showed she'd been planning this for a while and wasn't just having a temporary crisis. I spent the next few days gathering financial documents and making copies of everything while Emma continued to act like nothing was wrong. She'd come home from work and ask about my day and talk about her plans for the weekend, and the whole time I kept thinking about how she'd told my mom that pretending to be happy was exhausting her. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was still pretending even after admitting to my mom how miserable she was. On Friday, I had the divorce papers drawn up, and that evening when Emma got home from work, I was sitting at our kitchen table with the papers in front of me. She walked in with groceries and started unpacking them while chatting about some customer at the bookstore who'd been looking for an obscure novel, and she was completely oblivious to what was about to happen. I waited until she finished putting the groceries away, and then I said, "Emma, we need to talk," and she turned around and saw the papers on the table, and her face went completely white. She asked what those were, and I told her they were divorce papers and that I was filing for divorce immediately. Emma just stared at me for the longest time and then asked why I was doing this and if I was having some kind of midlife crisis. I told her that I'd overheard her conversation with my mom on Tuesday, where she told my mom that she'd been planning to divorce me for months because I was too boring and she felt trapped in our marriage. I watched all the color drain out of her face as she realized I'd heard everything. She started crying and saying that she didn't mean it the way it sounded and that she was just venting to my mom because she'd been feeling confused about our marriage, but that didn't mean she actually wanted a divorce. I told Emma that I'd also found her apartment searches and her emails to her sister and the draft email she'd written to me asking for a separation, so I knew this wasn't just venting, this was a plan she'd been working on for months. Emma kept trying to backtrack and say that she'd just been going through a rough patch and that she loved me and didn't want to get divorced, but I told her that you don't spend months researching apartments and talking to lawyers if you're just going through a rough patch. I said that she'd made it very clear to my mom that she thought I was fundamentally boring and that she'd never be happy with someone like me, so I was giving her the freedom to find someone more exciting. She begged me to reconsider and said we could go to counseling and work things out, but I reminded her that she'd specifically told my mom that counseling couldn't fix our fundamental incompatibility. I said that everything she'd told my mom was probably true and that I deserved to be with someone who actually wanted to be married to me instead of someone who was just tolerating me while planning their escape. Emma cried and apologized and said she'd been stupid and that she didn't really want to leave me, but I told her that the Emma who'd spent months planning to divorce me was probably more honest than the Emma who was now crying and begging me to stay because she got caught. I said that she'd called me boring and compared being married to me to living in a retirement home, and those weren't things you say about someone you want to stay married to. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I served Emma with divorce papers and things have been absolutely insane. Emma initially refused to move out of our house and kept insisting that we could work things out if I would just give her a chance to explain, but I told her that I'd heard all the explanation I needed when she told my mom exactly how she felt about our marriage. The first few days were torture because Emma kept trying to sedge me with romantic gestures and promises that she'd change and be the wife I deserved. She cooked elaborate dinners and planned surprise date nights and kept telling me how much she loved me and how sorry she was for hurting me, but it all felt fake and desperate, like she was just trying to prove she could be exciting when she needed to be. What really got to me was that she kept saying she'd been going through a hard time and wasn't thinking clearly when she talked to my mom, but then I reminded her about all the emails and apartment searches and the draft separation letter and asked her how long this hard time had been going on because the evidence suggested months of planning, not just one bad conversation. My mom called me crying the day after I told Emma I was filing for divorce because Emma had called her sobbing and begging her to convince me to change my mind. My mom felt terrible because she realized that Emma had been using their phone calls to vent about our marriage and that she'd inadvertently helped Emma plan to leave me by listening and giving advice. My mom told me that she'd always thought Emma was just going through a phase where she was feeling restless and that she'd encouraged Emma to talk to me about wanting more excitement in our relationship instead of bottling up her feelings. She said she never imagined that Emma was actually planning to divorce me and that she felt horrible for not telling me that Emma had been expressing doubts about our marriage. I told my mom that it wasn't her fault and that I was actually grateful that I'd overheard the conversation because otherwise I would have been blindsided when Emma eventually worked up the courage to leave me. I said that at least now I knew where I stood and could move forward instead of living with someone who was just counting down the days until she could escape. Emma's sister came to our house last week to try to convince me to give Emma another chance, and she told me that Emma had been calling her every day crying and saying that she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Her sister said that Emma realized now that she'd been taking our stable happy marriage for granted and that she was terrified of losing me over what she called a temporary crisis of faith in our relationship. I told Emma's sister that calling it a temporary crisis was insulting to my intelligence because you don't spend months researching apartments and divorce lawyers during a temporary crisis. You do that when you've made up your mind that you want out. I said that Emma had been very clear with my mom that she felt trapped and bored and that she didn't think counseling could fix our fundamental incompatibilities, so why should I believe that she'd suddenly changed her mind just because she got caught? Emma finally moved out of our house this week and went to stay with her sister because the tension was unbearable and we couldn't have a conversation without her crying and begging me to reconsider. She took most of her clothes and personal items but left a lot of our shared belongings, which I think was her way of showing that she still hoped this was temporary and that we'd eventually work things out. The house feels weird and empty without her, but honestly it's also a relief not to have to deal with her constant apologies and promises to change. I keep thinking about how she told my mom that pretending to be happy in our marriage was exhausting her, and now I understand what she meant because these past 2 weeks of her pretending to want to save our marriage have been exhausting for me. My lawyer says the divorce should be finalized within the next few months since Emma isn't contesting it and we don't have kids or complicated assets to divide. Emma asked if we could try a trial separation instead of divorce, but I told her that she'd already had months to decide whether she wanted to be married to me and she'd made her choice, so I wasn't interested in dragging this out any longer. Update 2. It's been 6 weeks since I filed for divorce and Emma has apparently moved on to phase 2 of her campaign to win me back, which involves enlisting everyone we know to convince me that I'm making a huge mistake. I've gotten calls from her parents, her coworkers, her college friends, and even some of our mutual friends all telling me that Emma is devastated and that I should give her another chance because everyone makes mistakes and marriage is about forgiveness. What's really frustrating is that Emma has been telling people a version of the story that makes it sound like she just had some doubts about our marriage and expressed them to my mom, and now I'm divorcing her for being honest about her feelings. She's conveniently leaving out the part about spending months planning to leave me and researching apartments and talking to divorce lawyers and basically living a double life while I thought we were happy. Her college roommate called me last week and said that Emma had told her I was divorcing her because she'd admitted to my mom that she sometimes felt bored in our marriage and that I was being unreasonable and unforgiving. I had to explain to her that there's a difference between sometimes feeling bored and telling someone that you're dying of boredom every single day and that you've been thinking about divorce for months and that you're planning to ask for a separation. Emma's dad called me yesterday and asked if we could meet for coffee because he wanted to understand what had happened and see if there was any way to fix things. I really respect Emma's dad and didn't want to hurt him, but I felt like he deserved to know the truth about what his daughter had been planning, so I told him everything I'd overheard and found. He was quiet for a long time after I finished talking, and then he said he had no idea that Emma had been so unhappy or that she'd been making concrete plans to leave me. He said that Emma had told him and her mom that we were going through a rough patch, but that she'd made it sound like normal marriage stuff, not like she was actively planning to divorce me. Emma's dad apologized for calling and said that he understood why I felt betrayed and that he probably would have made the same decision if he discovered that his wife had been planning to leave him for months while pretending everything was fine. He said that he loved Emma but that what she'd done was wrong and that he couldn't ask me to forgive something that's serious just to keep the family together. The worst part of all this is that Emma apparently told my mom that I was being cruel and vindictive by refusing to even consider counseling and that I was throwing away our marriage without giving her a chance to fix things. My mom called me upset because she felt like she was caught in the middle and didn't know how to handle Emma calling her crying all the time. I told my mom that Emma had made her choice months ago when she started planning to leave me and that I wasn't being cruel by refusing to play along with her sudden change of heart now that she'd been caught. I said that Emma had been very clear with my mom about how she felt about our marriage and about me personally, and those weren't things she could just take back because she realized she'd made a mistake. My mom said she felt terrible because she realized that Emma had been using their relationship to get validation for her decision to leave me and that she'd been unknowingly helping Emma justify ending our marriage. She said that looking back on their conversations, Emma had never once mentioned trying to work things out with me or attempting to communicate her needs better. She just complained about how boring and unsatisfying our marriage was. I'm honestly ready for this whole thing to be over because I'm tired of everyone treating me like the bad guy for not wanting to stay married to someone who spent months planning to divorce me. Emma made her feelings about our marriage very clear when she thought I couldn't hear her, and I'm just taking her at her word and giving her what she wanted. Update 3. The divorce was finalized last week and I thought that would be the end of this nightmare, but apparently Emma had one more surprise in store for me. 3 days after our divorce became official, Emma showed up at my house crying and saying that she'd made the biggest mistake of her life and that she wanted to try to get back together. She said that living on her own for the past 2 months had made her realize how much she missed our life together and that she'd been stupid to think that excitement and adventure were more important than having a stable, loving relationship with someone who truly cared about her. Emma told me that she'd been trying to date other people but that no one compared to me and that she finally understood what she'd thrown away. I told Emma that it was too late and that I'd moved on and didn't want to try again with someone who'd spent months planning to leave me while pretending to be happy. She kept crying and saying that she'd learned her lesson and that she would never take me for granted again, but I reminded her that the problem wasn't that she'd taken me for granted, the problem was that she'd fundamentally seen me as boring and incompatible with her needs. Emma tried to argue that she'd been going through some kind of quarter-life crisis and that she hadn't really meant the things she'd said to my mom, but I told her that people don't spend months researching apartments and divorce lawyers during a crisis. They do that when they've genuinely decided they want out of their marriage. I said that her conversation with my mom had been brutally honest about how she really felt, and I wasn't going to pretend that those feelings weren't real just because she regretted expressing them. She begged me to at least consider couples counseling so we could work through what had happened, but I told her that we were divorced now and I wasn't interested in trying to rebuild something with someone who'd already proven they were capable of living a double life for months while planning to abandon our marriage. Emma finally left after I made it clear that I wasn't going to change my mind, but she said she wasn't giving up and that she was going to keep trying to prove to me that she'd changed and that we belonged together. I told her that the best thing she could do for both of us was to accept that our marriage was over and move on with her life. The truth is that hearing Emma beg for another chance didn't make me feel vindicated or satisfied, it just made me sad because I realized that the woman I'd fallen in love with and married had never really existed. The real Emma was someone who could spend months planning to leave her husband while smiling and kissing him goodbye every morning, and that's not someone I could ever trust again, no matter how sorry she claimed to be. I'm actually doing better than I expected, and I've started dating someone new who appreciates the qualities that Emma found boring. Sarah is a librarian who loves quiet evenings at home and cooking together and watching old movies, and she thinks my reliability and stability are attractive rather than suffocating. It's nice to be with someone who actually wants the same kind of life I want instead of someone who's just tolerating it while planning their escape. I know Emma is still hoping I'll change my mind, but I've learned that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them the first time. Emma showed me that she was capable of months of deception and manipulation while planning to destroy our marriage, and that's not something I can forget or forgive even if she's genuinely sorry now. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them go find what they're actually looking for instead of trying to force them to be happy with something they've already decided isn't enough.